A few weeks ago, we were still living with the hope that my dad would be fine and that he was cancer-free, and we knew he was suffering with pain, but we were under the impression that that was residual pain from surgery. So we were very shocked with the news when he found a lump under his arm and had a needle biopsy, which then gave the diagnosis on March 5 of cancer, the return of his cancer. Through the course of a couple weeks, not even 2 weeks later, he slipped away in his sleep.
On the Sunday before he died, we had called in hospice care for him. He had been unable to make it to church that morning, which was a very ingrained habit with him, and we knew that it was serious if he could not make it to church. Within 10 minutes of them being there, being with my dad, going over his records, they had decided the best course would be for him to come back to the hospice house with them.
By Monday, the nurses informed us that his symptoms were not necessarily related to his cancer, which at that point had taken over his body, but they were related more specifically to that he was in the end stages of life. So that was a lot to swallow in a few days' time. Tuesday, we had a wonderful day with him, but we could see he was deteriorating in his health. But I sat on the couch with him and read the paper with him, and when I left that night, Tuesday night, I sat in front of him and gave him a big hug and told him how much I loved him and that I would be back in the morning to hang with him. And I hugged him tight and I said, "Can I have a hug?" And at that point he had been pretty unresponsive. And he lifted his tired arms and he embraced me in a hug. And that was my last earthly interaction with my dad.
Easter Sunday has a whole new meaning this year. Heaven has a whole new meaning to us. It is so much more real, whereas before it seemed a little more abstract. But it was a place that my dad was excited for. He could not wait to get there. It was very real to him. This Sunday, we go on with the hope of seeing him there someday.
Easter was my dad's favorite day of the year by far and away. He looked more forward to that day and that time of worship more than any other time. And it was so wonderful always to sit next to him during Easter because the emotion was so real in his eyes and in his face. And Easter meant everything to him. For those who know him, he didn't always live his life in his early years as a saved person. So Easter was such a sweet day because it just meant everything to him. You know, I sit here today just anticipating that celebration. It means so much more to know that there's victory over death, that as I look at my father's grave, that's not where he is.
Standing at my dad's grave, it was such a paradox of the deepest grief I have ever felt in my life. But followed so closely behind that was this immense sense of peace and the knowledge that he was not there in that grave. Already at that point, he was seated at the feet of Jesus, and he was whole again, and he was perfect, and that we had the hope of being there with him someday. That Jesus has conquered death. He has complete power over death, and this is not the end for my father. This is not the end for this family. This is not the end for anybody who trusts in that hope, and who trusts that we can all be in heaven someday with our loved ones that love and trust Jesus.
Amen, sister.